In the summer of 1942, the Pacific Ocean was not just a vast expanse of blue water. It was a battlefield that would determine the fate of nations. Less than 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the United States was still reeling, its Pacific Fleet battered, its morale shaken. Japan appeared unstoppable, sweeping across Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands in a string of conquests that seemed unbreakable. But in June 1942, at a remote atoll called Midway, everything changed. What unfolded in those days was not just a battle of ships and planes, but of intelligence, daring, and fate. The Battle of Midway was the first great carrier versus carrier clash in history, where opposing fleets never saw each other's battleships. It was a battle fought over the horizon, in the air, with torpedoes, dive bombers, and split-second decisions. Japan's ambition. In early 1942, Japan's military leaders believed their momentum was unstoppable. The stunning victories at Pearl Harbor, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the Philippines had given Tokyo confidence that America could be forced into negotiating a peace. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, understood one thing clearly. The United States, if allowed time, would rebuild its navy and bring overwhelming industrial might into the war. To avoid this, Japan needed a decisive blow. Midway was chosen as the target. Located about halfway between Asia and North America, the small atoll was strategically critical. Capturing it would expand Japan's defensive perimeter, threaten Hawaii, and possibly lure the U.S. carriers into a trap. Yamamoto's plan was complex, but clear. Use Midway as bait, ambush the American fleet, and destroy it. Breaking the code. What Yamamoto did not know was that his plans were no longer secret. In the months after Pearl Harbor, American codebreakers at Station Hiryū in Hawaii had been painstakingly working to decipher Japanese naval communications. By May 1942, Commander Joseph Rochefort and his team had cracked enough of Japan's JN-25 code to know that AF referred to Midway. To confirm, they devised a clever ruse. Midway sent out an unencrypted radio message claiming its water distillation plant had broken down. Soon after, Japanese intercepts reported that AF was short on water. The trap was confirmed. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, now knew exactly where Japan would strike, and when. The American gamble Nimitz faced long odds. The Japanese fleet dwarfed his own. 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Sōryū, and Hiryū, against America's 3, Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown. Japan's battleships and cruisers outnumbered the Americans as well. But Nimitz had the most valuable asset of all: foreknowledge. He positioned his carriers northeast of Midway, hidden, ready to strike. For the Americans, this was a desperate gamble. If the Japanese discovered their carriers first, the U.S. fleet might be annihilated. But if American pilots struck first, they could level the playing field in a single decisive blow. June 4th, 1942. The battle begins. At dawn on June 4th, the Japanese launched their first wave of aircraft against Midway Island itself. Bombs fell across the tiny atoll, setting fuel tanks ablaze and destroying installations. But the island's defenders, Marine Corps pilots flying outdated Brewster Buffaloes and Wildcats, rose into the sky to fight back. They were outmatched by the more advanced Japanese Zero fighters. Losses were heavy, yet the defense was fierce, forcing Japan's commander, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, to consider a second strike on the island. Unbeknownst to him, American planes were already on the way. Midway's own bombers, B-17s, B-26 Marauders, and torpedo-carrying planes attacked the Japanese fleet in waves, though none hit their targets. Still, their persistence forced the Japanese to keep maneuvering, delaying crucial decisions on their carriers. The torpedo squadron's sacrifice. From the decks of Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, American carrier planes launched to attack. Coordination was chaotic, navigation uncertain, and radio communication patchy. Torpedo squadrons went in first, slow, lumbering TBD devastators armed with outdated torpedoes. What happened next was one of the most tragic and heroic episodes of the battle. Torpedo Squadron 8 from the Hornet, led by Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, found the Japanese carriers and pressed in at low altitude. Without fighter cover, they were slaughtered by Japanese Zeros and anti-aircraft fire. All 15 devastators were shot down. Only one man, Ensign George Gay, survived, floating in the ocean to witness the rest of the battle unfold. Minutes later, Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise and Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown suffered the same fate. Out of 41 torpedo bombers launched, only a handful returned. Not a single torpedo found its mark. The dive bombers strike. At that critical moment, the U.S. Navy's dive bombers arrived. Bombing Squadron 6 and Scouting Squadron 6 from Enterprise, along with Bombing Squadron 3 from Yorktown, had been searching desperately for the Japanese carriers. By luck, timing, and skill, they appeared over the Japanese fleet just as Nagumo's carriers were most vulnerable. Decks cluttered with fueled aircraft and armed bombs being prepared for the next strike. At 10:22 a.m., the skies opened with a thunder of Stuka-like dives. Douglas SBD Dauntless bombers plunged down at steep angles. Within minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Sōryū, were engulfed in flames. Explosions ripped through their decks, sending black smoke billowing into the sky. Hiryū strikes back. But the battle was not over. The 4th Japanese carrier, Hiryū, survived the initial attack and counterpunched with deadly precision. Her planes found the Yorktown and struck hard, scoring direct hits. Flames engulfed the carrier, but her crew fought bravely, restoring enough power for her to continue launching planes. Later, another wave from Hiryū attacked, crippling Yorktown beyond repair. For a moment, it seemed Hiryū might balance the scales, but American dive bombers struck again in the afternoon, finding Hiryū and setting her ablaze. By nightfall, she too was lost. The aftermath, by June 5th, the battle was effectively decided. Japan's 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Sōryū, and Hiryū, lay beneath the Pacific, along with over 3,000 sailors. The U.S. had lost the Yorktown and around 100 men. The disparity was staggering. More than just the ships, Japan lost hundreds of its most experienced naval aviators, veterans of Pearl Harbor and the early Pacific campaigns. Midway was a devastating blow, from which it shifted the balance of power in the Pacific, halting Japan's expansion and giving the United States the momentum to move on to the offensive. A battle of chance and courage. The Battle of Midway was far more than a clash of steel, firepower, and burning carriers. It was a struggle defined by intelligence, timing, and the sheer courage of men who refused to yield. Behind the scenes, American codebreakers cracked the Japanese Navy's encrypted communications, uncovering Admiral Yamamoto's intricate plan and giving the U.S. a fighting chance. In the air, pilots hurled themselves into battle against impossible odds, many knowing they would not return, while commanders like Admiral Nimitz placed their trust in intuition and the resolve of their crews. Yet luck and chance wove themselves into history's fabric. At the very moment, Japanese decks were loaded with rearming aircraft and volatile fuel. American dive bombers appeared out of the clouds, striking with devastating precision. Admiral Nagumo's fatal hesitation in switching from bombs to torpedoes sealed the fate of his carriers. And before that decisive blow, entire torpedo squadrons sacrificed themselves, drawing Japanese fighters low and leaving the skies open for the hammer strike that changed the Pacific War forever. Legacy of Midway. Midway has long been remembered as the decisive turning point of the Pacific War, a battle that reshaped the trajectory of World War II in just a few fateful days of June 1942. From that moment onward, Japan, once an unstoppable juggernaut sweeping across the Pacific, was forced onto the defensive. The aura of invincibility surrounding the Imperial Navy was broken. For the United States, the victory was not merely symbolic. It gave Washington the initiative and the confidence to go on the offensive, beginning with Guadalcanal, then across the Solomon Islands, New Guinea, and ultimately toward the Japanese homeland itself. Closing reflection. When we watch the rare combat footage of the Battle of Midway, grainy images of dive bombers plummeting from the sky, aircraft carriers engulfed in flames, and sailors fighting desperately to save their ships, we are reminded that history's turning points are often decided not by overwhelming force alone, but by timing, intelligence, and human courage. Midway was one such moment. Outnumbered and outgunned, the United States Navy struck a blow that changed the course of World War II. In 5 minutes of fire and fury, the Pacific War's tide turned, and the echoes of that day still resonate across history's oceans.